Hey guys, it's Lisa with Are You My Cousin? And I'm here today for our Facebook Live this week to talk about researching our genealogy and researching and looking for our ancestors in burned counties. So we'll just kind of give it a few minutes. Hope everybody's having a good day. Give people a chance to hop in the group, to find us here. I will apologize up front if you hear random noises in the background. They are building a house across the street behind my office wall. And so I was hoping to catch them on their lunch break, but I think we may hear a little bit of hammering in the background. So if you do hear hammering or big trucks go by, I just ask you to ignore that. Hopefully the house builders will be taking a lunch break shortly. So when you come in, if you want, just give me a hi, wave at me, give me a like, let me know that you're here in the group. And we will get started here in just a moment. So today we are going to be talking about researching genealogy and researching our ancestors in burned counties. And I think many of us, if not all of us, at some point come up upon that particular problem. But let's define what is a burned county and from a genealogical standpoint. Really what that means is that a county has lost a significant number of its records, and it's usually because of a courthouse fire. So hence we call them burned counties. But truly, the significant loss could be from really any natural disaster. It could be flooding, it could be a hurricane, could be a fire, some such thing. But we typically refer to them all as burned counties. But it definitely makes it very difficult for us as researchers to find our ancestors if the records don't exist. It's one thing to know what records you're looking for, or you know what you want, but only to find out that they no longer survive. And what are you to do? And that's the big question. So one of the things that I wanted to share with you today was probably the biggest strategy I can tell you is to determine what types of records your ancestors created outside of the courthouse. So in other words, determine what types of records that your ancestors would have created, what their daily activities may have generated that would not normally be kept at the courthouse level or the county court level. And those are the records that you're going to want to pursue. So let's talk about a few of them. I'm actually referring, a lot of this you will find on the website in a post on how to research genealogy in a burned county, and I'll pop that link in the comments below at the end of this. But I did want to actually highlight several of the types of records that are recommended in that post here with you today. If you guys have questions, if you want to make a comment, feel free to put a comment in the comment box. It does show up while I'm talking, and I can answer that as we go. And that'll help me kind of make sure that I'm getting you the information that you guys need to have. If you're watching this as a replay, no worries. Just you can still leave a comment, and I do follow up on those comments. So, all right, guys, let's jump into those burned counties now that I think some of you guys have had a chance to find us this afternoon. So what do we as researchers do when we're trying to research an ancestor in that burned county? We're going to determine what exists that wouldn't be housed in that county court level. And the first thing you want to do, and this is sort of a little bit backtracking, but you want to search for any records that did survive. So the first thing you can do is don't assume that every record in that burned county was destroyed for that particular time period. And what do I mean by that? For instance, I've researched quite a bit in Moore County, North Carolina, and Moore County is a burned county. There's just not a lot for the time period that my ancestors lived there. There's not a lot there in the courthouse anymore. And this really kind of stalled my research for quite a while. And so I just assumed nothing existed. But I was wrong. There was one, maybe two, tax records, county tax books that did survive that fire. Hey, Debbie. And the archivist said, Lisa, why didn't you check this? Not everything, there are only a few things left, but this particular record is the time period that you need, and it is here. So they brought me this tax book, and it was singed, guys. Literally, you could see the smoke damage around the edges of the records. And I opened it, and sure enough, my ancestors, all of them, were right there in that record. Now, not only did I have a tax record, so I could put them in a time and a place, so very specific time and place, because I had a specific year. This particular record also happened to list any bodies of water, such as creeks, streams, or rivers that either crossed the property or that went beside the property, because they lived near the Cape Fear River. And so I was able to, in absence of deeds that did not survive that fire, I was actually able to place those ancestors in a very specific location within that county. So I made that mistake, and it stalled my research for a while because I did not ask what did survive. Was everything destroyed, or did something perhaps survive? There wasn't much, but my ancestors were in that book. So that was great. All right, guys. Hey, Debbie's here. Carol's here. Wonderful. Feel free, guys, if you're just joining us, to leave a comment. You can give me a thumbs up if there's something. Just let me know that you're here. Or if you have a question as we go along, feel free to type it in the comment section. I will check those periodically as we go along, and I can answer those as we go. So another example of checking to see hey Sharon, did anything survive would actually be in Ireland for that 1922 fire. You know, a lot of you have told me how difficult it is to research Irish ancestors, and absolutely it is. I have not done a ton of that myself, but anytime I start to put my toes into the Irish soil and my ancestors, it's tough. It really is, because of that massive fire in 1922 that destroyed so many records. But what I can tell you is not all the records were destroyed. So there are some census records left there. There are not many. I don't want to put out any rumors out there that there are a lot of records left. They're not. But there are a few fragments that did survive from the earlier time period in the 1800s, like from 1821, 1831, 1841. There are not many, but there are a few fragments. And so it's always worth if to check to see which counties that did survive. Is your Irish ancestor in one of those fragments? Because if they are, then you can just start doing the genealogy happy dance right then. But I don't want to indicate, as I said, that there's a lot of records left. They're not. They're certainly not. But there are a few fragments. So it will behoove you to actually ask and research out what records are available when you're in that burned area. Hey, Dom. Okay, so what else can you do in that burned county? You can take your research up a government level or two. And what do I mean by that? Okay, so not every record that your ancestor created, not every record that you research is actually a county record. It could be a state record. It could be a church record. It could be a legislative record. Okay, so for example, a state level record might be a land grant. So if you're researching land grants, those were state level records. Those were not kept at the county courthouse. So that would be a possibility to look for. Another thing would be in certain time periods, if you're researching and you suspect your ancestors had a divorce or petitioned, or even if they just petitioned for the divorce, whether it was granted or not, check that where those are kept. For certain time periods, those could be at the legislative level of your state, and they would be in those legislative papers. They would not be in the county courthouse records that would have been destroyed. So those are the kinds of records you can look at. Was your ancestor part of creating a new county? Did they live on a county lawn? Do you suspect that they're living in an area that had previously been another county? Check and look at the formation of that county. Look at the petition for that county. And those are going to be, again, at the state level records. The archivist for your state can help you determine which government branch would have those, or how to best find those. But there would have been a petition likely to the state legislature, and it would have been signed by many of the men in that area or in that county. So check that. That is a possibility for placing your ancestor in a place and in a time. Very important when there's so little to go on with that burned county. All right, so you definitely want to take it up another notch or so with that. And you can take things up to, if they were scoundrels, if they appeared in the Supreme Court, if you get any kind of thing like that, you can take it up to the Supreme Court level for those state courts and see what you can find there. It's a little more tedious, absolutely, but it is a possibility for you, as well as looking at military records. Those are another source. If you have an ancestor and you're suspecting that they were within the military or they're receiving state pension records, those are going to be at the state level and not at the county level. So be sure and check those records there. So you do have some options. It's not necessarily easy, I admit, but there are some options there. Okay, so another really important record set to search when you are looking at those ancestors, the county courthouse burned, the records are not there, you're going to look at newspapers. Now, you've heard me talk about newspapers in my stories because while I'm a big fan of researching newspapers, I didn't always like researching newspapers because, well, it's tedious. They're usually on microfilm. I get a little motion sick watching that microfilm fly by. And I read a lot not to find the information I need, but that's okay. It's important to the newspapers to look at them. They are going to be a wealth of information for you because they will document what's going on in the community. They document about who's researched. They document who lives there. They document who's coming and going. They document perhaps church news, particularly here in the South. A lot of times when I'm researching these small rural North Carolina, South Carolina newspapers, they have a lot of times about church happenings that are going on, so I know who's coming, who's visiting. So that's an important way of putting people in place in time. The obituaries, another really important resource to look at. One of the things when it comes to that type of thing, when you're looking for obituaries for your ancestors and you're in that burned county, you may want to also pursue the religious periodicals, the religious newspapers, and see if they are listed there, particularly because they might be more of a regional type thing, so they might pick them up, whereas it may not be, maybe the county your ancestor lived in was small. Maybe they didn't really have something like that, but maybe it's a regional newspaper that would pick that up for obituaries. All right, let me check the sideline. Everybody's talking. Okay, hey Sarah, hey Dawn. Okay, Debbie just put in here, she checked with the Irish relative and they had copied the records for the family before the fire. Before the fire, therefore they have some from that burn time. And see, that's a fabulous thing. Wonderful, check with your family. I hadn't really thought about that as much, but that's an excellent idea, Debbie. Thank you for that. Okay, so newspapers. Where can you find the newspapers, guys? Sometimes this is a little tough, and I think besides it just being sometimes tedious, I think finding them is kind of a tough thing to do, but there are some places to go. There certainly are the subscription-based databases. There's Genealogy Bank, which is a really great one. Find My Past has some great newspapers. Ancestry.com has some. They actually have a partnership or own newspapers.com, which is a subscription rate, and it's outside of the Ancestry, so it's a whole separate thing there. Chronicling America, which is a free site, so you know that, is a free site that has lots of newspapers. It's a wonderful site to go to. The other thing that I do when I'm looking for newspapers is I Google. I Google the location, maybe the county, the state, and then I might ask plus newspapers and see what's available there. I have also been known to just call the local library, talk to the local librarian, explain what I'm looking for, and find out if they have a resource that will tell me what newspapers were available in that area for that time period. If they have them, are they digitized? Usually they're on microfilm, quite honestly. Is it possible to get that microfilm through interlibrary loan? That kind of thing. More and more are being digitized and placed online, and that's always great. But I don't know if you're like me, but it always seems like my ancestors lived in the smaller areas that are not really anywhere close to digitizing those small newspapers. So talk to that local librarian in that county that you're researching and find out what's available. If it's on microfilm, you may be able to get that through an interlibrary loan, which would be a wonderful thing for you to be able to do. If you're able to actually go visit, if you're close enough, then I would absolutely recommend that you go visit that librarian in person and see what you can find out and what records that they might have. Oops, something in there. Hey, how are you? You're welcome. Okay, so I would absolutely, those are the ways I would check with the newspaper. As again, I said, it's tedious, but it can be very fruitful for your research. The next thing, another thing you can do is to search out church records, family Bibles, religious periodicals. I touched on the religious periodicals earlier, but they can be a very important piece because they're documenting a part of your ancestor's life that is important to them. And they typically will report the big things such as the births, the marriages, the death records. There are times when you can find some genealogy tree type things in these religious periodicals. If your ancestor was a minister, maybe there's been a write-up on that minister and on him, his family, where he came from, those kinds of things. I stumbled across that quite accidentally on one of mine. Fortunately, I was able to do the happy dance because he actually had a very common name of Smith, but he was a well-known Methodist minister in the area where he was, and he associated with the higher-ups in the Methodist movement here in America, and so there was quite a bit written about him and about his early life as well. So I was able to get that type of information on him through that particular resource, through some of those church periodicals. Family Bibles, again, that's kind of the holy grail that we as genealogists want. They're hard to find, I know that. But you may want to check with some of the county historians for where you're researching. Check with state archives. They are starting to get do more and more Bible projects, and they're starting to get them digitized and put online. So I think it's well worth your time to check with the county level historical and genealogical societies as well as the state archives to find out if they have any of those family Bible projects, if there's kind of an overall listing of what's available to be able to check out those. Those, again, is kind of the holy grail, hard to find, but when you do and when you know where to look, that can be a real helpful thing. Make sure you check back often, though, because those are the types of databases that tend to be updated frequently, or I should say, maybe not frequently, but periodically as they get something new in, but you might not necessarily get a news flash about it, that there's been an update kind of thing. Hey, Catherine, how are you? How are you? The other thing, so if you're looking for church records, again, those can be very helpful. Some churches kept more than others. It's going to be very important to you before you dive into just searching for church records in general. Do what you can and see if you can determine based on where your ancestor lived, based on any family history, oral history, family records that you might have already found, if you can determine what was the religious life like. Okay, were they Baptist? Were they Methodist? Were they Catholic? Were they Jewish? Were they, what church would they have perhaps, or religion did they have perhaps followed? The reason I say that is that it's important to know, once you know that, then what records were kept. So, because the Baptists kept very, very different records than, say, the Catholics. Quakers tended to keep very good records, but you need to know what types of records that they kept if your ancestors were Quakers. Okay, and at that point, you can determine what type of repositories have those. But those are the kinds of records that are going to be helpful. I don't want you just to say, oh, I'm going to go check like confirmation records, say, my ancestors were Baptist and I'm going to go look for the confirmation records. Well, don't, they didn't exist. They didn't keep that. That wasn't part of what they did, but it might be something that perhaps if your ancestors were Catholic, you would find there. Baptists didn't necessarily keep long list of baptismal records that you're going to find out there. But what you might find would be the minutes from the women's groups in the church, and that would be very helpful. So again, it's if you can narrow down the religion or even the denomination for your ancestor, and then kind of just work from there and determine what might be available, and then you can start searching out those repositories. If the church exists that your ancestors were part of, if it's a historical church, it still exists, oh, absolutely contact them. Many of them will have a historian on, usually it's a volunteer person, but they will have a church historian, and that's someone you want to talk to find out how to get into the records and what types of things they might have kept. If the church no longer exists, then I would recommend contacting the state or regional authority over that particular religion, as far, whether you're looking, say the Baptist Church no longer exists, but then you might want to go to check out the State Baptist Association for that particular state and see if they have any, if they know where the records ended up going, if they kept the records, or what happened there. So that would be a great way to do it. Now, lastly, the other thing that I wanted to bring up for you guys to search out would be private collections, private paper collections. And these are some, I think, sometimes the toughest to find because it could be anything. These private papers could be really anything. I mean, they could be letters to and from each other, and they frequently are that kind of thing. Let me see what else I had on there for what they could be. They could be personal letters. They could be county tax lists. I found extra tax lists stored that the county clerk kept as a backup one time. And so it could be a merchant's list. It could be if they were, it could be minister's papers. It could be his sermons. It could be his notes. It could be a physician's calendar. It could be a physician's notes, an old-timey physician's notes. I've actually transcribed some of those before, and that's a very interesting thing to look through. So it could be really, the door's wide open for that. But finding them, again, can be a little bit tough to do. One of the things that I usually recommend is, well, the state archives will oftentimes have private papers and private collections. You definitely want to talk to the archivist on staff there, someone on staff there who can help you navigate the finding aids. Finding the finding aid is important for those collections. Navigating it sometimes is not always very intuitive, and I think it will save you a lot of time if you just talk to a staff person and ask them how to navigate that. Sometimes it's simply sitting and reading through the collection. Other times you'll be able to narrow it down a little bit better. Excuse me. So absolutely, check out those finding aids. Excuse me one moment. A little dry there. Another great, another way to do that, to find private collection papers, check with the local historical and genealogical societies. Sometimes when people pass away, their family members will have donated those collections there as well. Look at local colleges or the universities areas, university settings and libraries. They may have collections, and frequently do have private collections. Again, they'll have their own finding aids, and so it always is very helpful to talk to a reference librarian there to find out how to access and how to use those finding aids. To give you an example, the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill has the huge, what they call the Doc South collection. It's and they have a number of records for documenting Southern culture throughout the South, and lots of private papers, lots of things to look through there. Some of that is online, to search for that online, and some of it you would need to go to their site or to their location to actually find it. But it's a huge resource, and it's a fabulous resource if you research Southern genealogy, not just North Carolina ancestors, but ancestors throughout the South. You'll find that type of information. So it's an important thing. I think the biggest thing I'm trying to drive home here is that there's a lot of stuff out there that we might not necessarily think about finding. Oh, my family doesn't have that, so it doesn't exist. And that's not always the case. It could be a collateral somebody off the collateral line donated something, and you just need to be able to get a little creative to find out how to do that, to find that. All right, let me check this chat over here. Debbie said, relative's wallet. My grandfather carried his BPOE membership cards and receipts. That sounds really interesting. I hadn't thought about looking in the wallet. Come to think of it, I think I have an ancestor's wallet too. I am not sure what BPOE is. Drop that in there, Debbie. I'm not sure what that means. But that's, that's a great idea. Yep, I actually do. I have some stuff from my great-grandfather's wallet as well. You just never know what you're going to find. That's for sure. So, yes, so finding those, it's the Elks Club. Actually, that brings up another good point, Debbie. You talk about the Elks Club. If if your ancestor was a member of that type of society, like an Elks Club or something, you may be able to find information on them there. Maybe if they printed things like directories for their society or so, you may find them in the newspapers. Again, back to the newspapers, because your ancestor participated in that type of society, then you may find them in the newspapers as well, because they frequently did a lot of charitable work or just community work. That's an excellent place to look as well. I don't know if anybody's familiar with what's called Archive Grid. Has anybody, if you've used that, give me a thumbs up or drop it in the comment section. Archive Grid is another great resource for finding your ancestors in private collections across the US. Because don't assume that because your ancestor lived in North Carolina, their records could show up in somebody, in a private collection database somewhere in Tennessee or in California or Colorado, because a descendant who happened to inherit those somewhere along the way eventually ended up donating them from where they lived. So they could be anywhere. So Archive Grid is a wonderful way to look out, and it searches all these private repositories, and so that you can see where your potential papers for your ancestor are, private papers. You can search it by person, you can search it by location, you can search it by type of record, and there's actually I'll drop the link in the comments below when we get done. I'm looking at it and still kind of playing with it some, because I am going to do a post on it, watch for a blog post coming in the future on how to actually use it and navigate that for part of your research, as part of your research, because I think it was going to be, I think you're going to find it very useful to have that in your genealogy toolbox as we go. Okie doke. So we have talked about burned counties. It's not a hopeless cause to research ancestors in burned counties. It is hard to do. It is not always successful. I'll be quite honest. I don't want to put that out there. Sometimes you can do everything you can do and the information's not there. And you're just going to be stuck for a while. That's okay. Okay. Sometimes not every question is answerable. But don't give up too early. That's what I really want to impress is don't give up too early on your research for these counties just because they're in a burned county. It's tough. It is time consuming, I will tell you that, because oftentimes your records are not online and you're going to have to figure out how to get hold of those records, or you're going to need to wait for that microfilm to come to you, those kinds of things, or you're going to need to wait for somebody to actually research it for you and get back to you. So it's not a fast thing, but don't give up too early in your process as you're going through that research in those counties. Okie doke. So what else is happening over here at Are You My Cousin this week? There's a lot going on. I feel like there's a lot going on. So as you're watching this, you'll be able to see this video again if you want to. If you want to look at it again, I do keep all Facebook Live videos are posted there in the group. And you can actually you can find them easily. If you look after the video tab up there in the upper left-hand corner on the group site, you'll see that off to the left. And you'll find, I'll have this one in there, but you'll find any of the others that you may have missed, the Facebook Lives. They live there. You can see them in the feed, certainly as you come into the group, but you'll find them stored over there as well for easier access. So if you miss one or have missed one in the past, missed one in the future, check that tab and you'll find that for that. Another really exciting thing I wanted to tell you is you guys have probably already figured out our group has grown tremendously. I had no idea it would, that it would grow so quickly, and I'm so thrilled it did. But we are actually up over 1,000 members now, and I'm absolutely thrilled and a bit amazed. And so I wanted to make things a little bit easier for you guys to maybe make some of those connections that I've been seeing. Many of you are making wonderful research connections within it. You're finding people with similar, who are researching the same surname. You're finding people who are researching the same locations. So I think that, and I'm thrilled with that. But I do know it gets hard as people start, more and more people interact, the conversations get lower and lower in the feed and it's hard to find them. Or maybe you remembered something and you needed to find somebody again. So I created a group database. This is voluntary, but I think it would be very helpful if the more people who do it. You'll see under files, again, over there in the upper left-hand corner on the group page, you'll see files. Go into that and you'll see a submit form. You can fill that form out and it will automatically populate the database and I think it's 3, maybe 4 questions, basically, your Facebook name or the name you're known by on Facebook, which is important because that's how it's easier to search for people that way. Surnames that you're researching, and locations. It's a great way to maybe help make connections. If you're researching and want to check that out, hop over to the group database. You'll see that file in there as well, and check it out and see if you find somebody who's with similar interests for you. The genealogy coaching sessions, the enrollment period is still open. There are still spots in both the January 30th session and the February 1st session. Feel free to hop over there. The enrollment does close on the 27th. This is a time, if you're not familiar with it, this is going to be an interactive time. I limit participants to 5 for each group. It is a time for us to talk about strategies. It is a time to talk about your particular research problem that you're having and to try to come up with those next steps to progress your research down the road. So if you haven't had a chance and you want to check that out, just feel free. I'll pop that link in the bottom under the comments as well, and you can check that out too. If you have questions, feel free to email me and ask me. I'm happy to answer all those questions. Lastly, I want to tell you guys we've had a great discussion this week on libraries and what we can find in our local libraries. I think they're oftentimes very underutilized by us as genealogists, and I really was thrilled. A lot of my librarians chimed in, which was fabulous, telling us things that their libraries had. There are some amazing libraries out there, guys. And while I know a lot of what my local library has, it makes me wonder, what am I missing? And maybe I need to check that out a little bit more, and I think I probably will. So absolutely, you may want to go back and read through that thread. Feel free to let us know what you found in local libraries, or just get an idea of what could possibly be out there. Okay, you guys really like this library idea. So pop in there and really get a chance to see what your local library may have for you. I think even if you use them, you may still be missing some important parts. So there you have it, guys. I think that's all I have for today. So thank you so much for joining me today for talking about burned counties. Again, I'll put in the link below in the comment when in this, and you can go back to see that. And I look forward to seeing you more in the Facebook group. Have a great day, guys.